Hello, quick summary of the Dwarven Halls Campaign playthrough that took place at the weekend. So this was the first weekend we played through chapters 1, 2, and 3. And as you may have seen from some of the photos, we played in the conservatory of the house we've now moved to. So we managed to get a nice suntan while we played, which is good, although it did get rather warm on the Saturday. So in part 1, the heroes arrive at the Black Lobster Inn, not that one, to set the scene, to meet each other, to meet some of the NPCs, and to get given their mission, because obviously meeting at an inn is the classic trope. So we had 4 players. We've got Jara Oakshadow, the elf combat mage. Did manage to break his spear off. I'm going to have to try and reglue that before we play next time. That's a 3D print. In fact, all the miniatures are 3D prints, but that one's from Blue Giant Studios. And so Jara Oakshadow is an elf warrior mage, uses a spear, dodging, combat mage, using the combat magic from the combat companion. So some fighting spells like Fireblade, Blade Rune, etc. In addition, we've got another elf. So we've got Iola Skyrack, which is, try and get it in front of the camera. And I know these cameras don't do miniatures justice. I'll try and get some pictures of those. So Iola Skyrack is an elf rogue with the hedge magician talent from the magic companion, which means that they can never learn full magic, but they can cast all of the minor magic spells. And they made great use of things like push and pucker and so on. So they made a lot of use of minor magic spells. So we've got 2 elves. We've also got the other characters are dwarves. So we've got Slate Truthheart, Dwarf Priest. That's a Bright Miniatures dwarf there. And Dwarf of Throth, Goddess of the Earth. And again, made really quite impressive use of the earthquake spell, made some use of the benedictions that feature in the priest companion. Obviously can wallop people, gone down the traditional mace route, and so on. So obviously these are all novice characters. These, the elves have got skill 5, the dwarf priest has got skill 4. And then the final player decided to take a rather novel approach and had 2 characters for the price of 1. Now, this was by agreement with myself, and what he actually did was he took his base stats and split his additional points between both of those, which does obviously give him twice as many attacks and so on, but it also means that he's got to deal with twice as many provisions and so on and so forth. And so what we've got Prince Dracon Obsidian Crag. Okay. Dwarf Prince who is looking for his lost kingdom. And he's accompanied by his bodyguard, Sir Rockknocker. Again, they're bright minis. And Sir Rockknocker's sworn an oath of silence, so can't communicate. I have to admit, the other players, the other characters, were somewhat dubious of the claims to royalty of this Prince Dracon Obsidian Crag. And there were various references, especially from the elves, which I suppose is no great surprise as to his real credentials. And indeed, at one point, when he was knocked unconscious, there was some discussion as to whether they should search him for a wallet to try and find his driving license and find out what his real name was. Unfortunately, that didn't quite happen due to one thing or another, but Prince he claims to be, and so Prince we have to assume he is. So the first session was meet up at the inn, and there was a bit of argy-bargy with a couple of wild hillmen, which was rather dealt with by some minor magic, making the hillmen somewhat attracted to Sir Rockknocker. So he was then subject to some unwanted attention from a couple of rough hillmen, but it diffused the situation rather nicely. And I don't want to spoil the adventure for anyone who's going to play it, but there was some action just before dawn the following day, which everyone weighed in on and went pretty well from the character's point of view. In the second section, they headed down into the cellars underneath the inn. And again, there were various encounters. There was quite a lot of faffing about going on, which, for anyone who knows my players, knows that's pretty much par for the course. If there's not several hours of faffing around out of every sort of 12, something has gone terribly wrong. And they then found their way into the Underdark roads, and session 3 was the first 2 days of their journey proper. And as I've mentioned before, this campaign is very similar to the Crown of Kings campaign in that there's some NPCs to meet, there's some monsters to fight, there's some traps to deal with, there's all sorts of other challenges to face. They're not all just fights, they're not all just enemies, they're not all just monsters. There are all sorts of challenges. And at the end of it, when we finished early afternoon on the Sunday, everyone was really, really, really happy with how it went. They enjoyed the adventure, they enjoyed the playthrough, they enjoyed the mix. And what was quite nice from a GMing point of view is because you've effectively got micro dungeons, it means that they turn up at one micro dungeon and it might be full of fungus, or it might be full of fire, or it might be whatever. And you've got one particular monster type. So you can play through a micro dungeon. You've got, the issues of slipping if you try and do athletics rolls, or heat exhaustion with fire, or whatever. You've got that for a few rooms, for an hour or whatever. And then they travel on. A few hours later, they might come across something utterly different. They might have come across some goblin caves, or an ogre lair, or a troll, or whatever. And then they fight that, and they just might defeat that. It might only be a couple of rooms, and then they move on. They find something else. There were some spiders in there. Again, that's probably not a spoiler to say that there are some spiders in there. You'd probably expect those. There were some spiders, and they proved to be extremely dangerous with their poison. But they've got to the end of their first 2 days. Chapter 4, which is written at the moment and was available should we need it, but we didn't get time. Chapter 4 is another couple of days travel before Chapter 5, which is like a big set piece. Chapter 6 is something a little bit different. And then Chapter 7, 8, 9 are back to journeys, some bigger set pieces, etc., before the showdown in Chapter 10 in the Dwarven village of Stonehaven. So the crowdfunder for that, the Game Found, is going to launch this weekend. There's a link in the chat below the video. Hopefully you're as excited about this upcoming campaign as I am, and I think it's a good one. It's a good one to back. It's going to be quite a big book. We're up to page 60 odd in the layout, and that's chapters 1, 2, and 3. And that's not really the introduction. I think character creation's in there, but there's no introduction. So you're probably talking best part of 70 pages to the end of chapter 3. And then and chapter 4 is 28 pages in manuscript form with no maps, no art, etc. So I'm expecting this to be around the 250 plus page mark for a campaign. And we went through it at a reasonable rate at the weekend. And obviously I know all of the bits intimately, but you've got quite a considerable amount of gaming through the entire campaign, if you choose to play it at a normal rate. I mean, we got best part of 20 hours of gaming in over the weekend. And we did the 3 parts going through fairly quick. So hopefully that tells you a little bit more about it and about our campaign. And hopefully we'll meet up in a couple of months to play through the next part. Otherwise, thank you very much, and until next time, thanks.